People are looking for more than just that physical house.
Our data also does show that it can take a considerable time for people to actually feel settled in their new home, their new environment.
It does take time for communities to build.
What makes a neighbourhood worth moving to? Not just now, but for the long haul. Because let's be honest, with affordability and the housing crisis at play, the Aussie dream has certainly shifted. In partnership with Stockland, I'm here with REA Group senior economist Anne Flaherty, who is deep in the data on this topic, and Cherie McMahon, General Manager of Customer and Marketing from Stockland. And let's start with the big picture. How big of an effort is it for the average Aussie to buy their first home or their next home?
Look, for most of us, it's a mammoth effort. We know that the time it takes to save that deposit has been growing and growing. It's currently sitting a little over 6 years, and it often requires two incomes. If we look at wage growth, it's been far below the rate at which house prices have grown over the decades. And again, that's really one of the factors that's making it more and more difficult.
So then where are buyers going to find this Aussie dream? Are our capital cities just completely maxed?
Look, I think when it comes to that first home, there's sort of two options that people generally take. One is to buy a smaller apartment closer into the city. The other option is for buyers who need a bit more space. Maybe they're looking to start a family. They look further out. So in the outer suburbs, newly established communities where the entry price point is going to be lower.
So where have you seen people flocking to live in order to get this space?
The Ripley Valley, which is kind of west of Brisbane. This is an area that's got really beautiful lifestyle attributes. So you can live in a spot that's not overly dense, that's got lots of parks and great neighbourhoods.
Okay, so then what types of buyers are finding their homes here?
So largely our buyer is Middle Australia first home buyer, which makes up sort of half of our customers. So across most of the states that we deal with, it's typically your first home buyers, either young couples, early 30s, and young couples with kids. So that makes up the bulk of the people that we talk to. In Sydney, more your upgrader market. Those upgraders are probably either coming from an apartment and deciding that they want more space and that they're able to move out to the greenfield.
What does the data say about what buyers want in a new neighbourhood? How do you turn a new area into a thriving community that is then going to translate on a lifestyle level?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it really starts with thoughtful planning up front. So we make sure that when we're designing every master plan, that we're designing it with a bit of flexibility because things can change over time and some of our communities can be developed over 10 to 20 years. One piece that is really critical for us is our livability survey that we run every year and been running that for over a decade. And this really gives us a great insight to what it is that customers want. And we know that the two key drivers to, I guess, happiness of how they're feeling and how they're living in our communities is really around their home design. So did they pick the right house? Is it functional? Does it suit their family? And then the second piece, which is it's really around the community amenities. So have we created a place where I've got easy access to retail, commercial, education? We know if we can get those two things right, that people are going to be really happy in the place that we've created.
Just talk me through that livability survey because that sounds super interesting. What were the major takeouts?
So our livability survey we run every year. Normally it's about 2,000 to 3,000 customers come back to us via that survey. It has both a quant and qual aspect to it. And it's a really rich data set that informs what it is that our customers want to make them happy to live on one of our projects. And we've learned a lot out of it. One of the thematics coming out at the moment is really around safety and security, and the other one's probably around sense of belonging. So we spend a lot of time looking at how do you make streets and neighbourhoods feel safer, whether it's street lighting, passive surveillance. And then on that sense of belonging, I think that people feel happier when they're connected. So we make sure that we do a lot of activations on our communities. We ran an open doors event in January this year and we'll run it again next year. And this is really about, being able to be out in the parks and meeting your neighbours because we know that really can make people feel a lot happier and increase their well-being.
So if I could put you on the spot here, Cherie, what do you think are the 3 key neighbourhood design elements that buyers should be looking for when they're considering that up-and-coming area?
I think it's about planning for the future and knowing what it is that you might need in your life and your lifestyle. And I think education, access to retail and greenery are 3 key things that'll be really important for any area. If you plan on having a family, sitting in a long commute isn't ideal. So making sure you've got access to education close by. We're actually delivering a number of different town centres around Australia at the moment, and having that amenity, whether it's bread and milk or your full-scale shopping, these things are just really important to have within close proximity to your house. And I think there's a lot of research to support that spending time in nature can really improve how you feel. So we make sure in the majority of our master plans that green space is, located really close and within walking distance of your house.
And how does our data stack up to this? What do people want in a community, and is it similar to what Cherie's been saying?
It's very consistent, actually. And when we look at our own property seeker and movers data, it really shows up that people are looking for more than just that physical house. People are increasingly looking ahead as well to what is my future circumstance going to be? Am I going to be having children one day? Am I going to be using that space to work in as well? So we know that particularly post-COVID, people are increasingly focused on what's around the actual property itself. Day to day, when I go for a walk, what's the local park like? Are there spaces available for me to spend time with my friends and family? And then, of course, that amenity is critical. So whether there's childcare or good schools nearby, how far do you have to travel to your place of work? Even things like co-working spaces in a community can be really great for a lot of people, particularly those with young children who are working from home, or you've got your own business. Having access to all kinds of different spaces that fit your lifestyle really shape where people look to buy.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, moving is like one of the most massive things that we can do. It's stressful, it's time consuming, it's something we actually don't do often. Our data also does show that it can take a considerable time for people to actually feel settled in their new home, their new environment. And Stockland's been building these new communities for over 70 years now. Like, Cherie, do you know how long it takes, or do you have any data on what people tell you about how long it takes for these residents to feel like these communities are their home?
Yeah, I think anecdotally we know that it takes a little bit of time for people to feel connected to the neighbourhood that they're in. But I think what they can find within their street pretty much straight away is like-minded people within that area. It does take time for communities to build and that social fabric to really start to form. But I look at all of our early communities, and we do get data sets out of livability in relation to those early stage communities. Some of the verbatims that we get really talk to the activations that we run and these neighbourhood nights, really start to encourage those friendships that are born with, spending time with your neighbours. I think our asset out at Craigieburn, which is called Highlands, is a really great example. We had our 20-year anniversary of that asset a few years ago, and we've got great stories of customers who have bought 2 or 3 houses there, and they've really grown up there and their families have grown up there, and that's had an enormous amount of amenity built there over time. But it's great to hear those stories from our customers about how our early imagination of what we thought a place would be really comes to fruition.
So those people who have bought, 2 houses, 3 houses, I would call them like quite pioneers of those local communities. I imagine those people who are pioneering the communities getting in earlier, they do get in for a cheaper price because the community is in its infancy, as opposed to somebody who's buying into those communities when it's like fully master planned. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I think you can take advantage of an affordable entry price if you're willing to see the potential. And, I hope over the last sort of 70 years that we've been doing it, we've got a really good evidence base to suggest that we will deliver on what we're saying we will. The ability to grow that equity is great, particularly for young families who, might want to go to their second house. I do encourage people to really try and get into those early stages.
So, Anne, can we just fast forward to 2030, a couple of years away? What do you think buyers are going to be looking for then? Will things have changed in any capacity?
Well, I think one of the first big changes is what a typical Aussie household looks like. Now, 50 years ago, as I mentioned, we could say that couples with children, they were the most common type. Now we're seeing a whole range of different household structures. So we know that single and two-person households, there's more of them than there are families. But at the same time, we're also seeing this growing trend of generational living. So you've got, maybe 3-4 generations all in the one home. Flexibility is really the key here. And I think that people want to buy into a home and a community that's going to adapt with their changing lifestyle. I think people are often looking for a home where they can spend multiple phases of their life. So whether that's raising a family, whether that's the empty nester, that adaptability in terms of, what do we do with the spare bedroom? Is it for a person to sleep in? Is it going to be for a home office? Are we going to make a games room? Even the garage, of course, is being used for all kinds of different things, which our own research has picked up some really fascinating trends into how people are adapting those spaces. The adaptability of the home, and then I think looking ahead to infrastructure. What's coming? Is it going to improve livability in an area? And of course, we know that those big infrastructure projects can also add a lot of value to suburbs.
Okay, so we really need our houses to work pretty hard for us. Cherie, do you have anything to build upon that? Is Stockland starting to plan for all this adaptability, et cetera, et cetera?
I've seen builders starting to look at designs where there's 2 en-suites so that as your, child gets a little bit older, they're able to still stay at home. I think, kids are staying at home a lot longer. So having that adaptability in floor plans is really critical. If you've got a pretty open plan home that there's flexibility, maybe you want a theatre room, maybe you don't. I think just ensuring that there's that level of flexibility is just really critical.
Before we wrap up, I do have one more question for you both. And if someone is house hunting right now, what is your one big tip to help them find a community that's actually going to be a good fit for their lifestyle?
Look, I think doing your homework, and that isn't just going on the computer researching suburbs. I think it's getting out there, walking
go have
around.
a coffee there.
Exactly. Walk around the neighbourhood, get a sense of what the people there are like, hang out in the local coffee shop. Can you picture yourself in that neighbourhood? And then again, doing your research around what future infrastructure projects are coming. Are there going to be new schools built in an area? What is this area going to evolve into?
And Cherie, do you have anything to build on that?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Anne sort of touched on there, but I just think it's convenience, making sure that you're thinking about the future in mind and have you got parks close by? Is there education? You're going to be chauffeuring your kids to school for over a decade, so you want to make sure that everything is really close by and you want to sit in a street and understand it for a little bit. And I'd suggest to people that you always go out 2 or 3 times, different times of the day, just to understand what it's like, particularly, if you were commuting back into the city. I think try and be in a place for a period of time will help you understand if it's the right place for you and your family.
Well, look, thank you so much for both of your time. I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me. This has been Real Talk. For your weekly fix, please follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and tune in next time for more real questions, news and insights on the topics that matter most from realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. The information discussed in this podcast is provided for general information purposes only and reflects opinions based on information available at the time of recording. It should not be relied upon as financial, legal or professional advice. You should make your own inquiries and seek independent advice tailored to your circumstances before making any decisions. Views expressed by third parties are their own and do not necessarily represent those of Stockland. To the maximum extent permitted by law, Stockland accepts no liability for any loss or damage arising from reliance on this content.
Real Talk acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, air and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present.